am already standing at your door. In the very season you were sure you would have to face with nothing. I have not come with my arms full, not to pour into your empty jar before you feel one thing change. I have come the other way around. I have come to ask you for the first handful, the small trembling scraping you were saving, to get through one more day, and to tell you, even as you hear this, that the giving of it will not be the end of you. You know the size of what is left in you, without anyone asking you to measure it. You have been the one who serves the fuller plate and keeps the thinner one, the one who eats standing at the counter after the rest of the house has gone quiet. You hand over the warmer coat, the better seat, the last clean stretch of your patience, and you call it love. It is love. It is also a quiet going without that no one at your table has ever once noticed. What is left of you at the end of a day would fit inside a cupped hand. You have grown so used to that smallness. You have stopped calling it hunger. Here is the first thing I want you to see. Long before you count what remains for you, you have already given the best of it away, not the leftovers. The first and warmest portion goes out your door, every morning, out to people who will never learn what it cost you to send it. Then you sit down, after, with the scraping at the bottom of everything, and you study it the way a tired person studies bad news. That habit was not born in weakness. It was born in a season when giving first was simply how the ones you loved got fed. But a habit shaped in a hungry year does not always hear the news that the year has finally turned. Some of you were trained at a very small table. You learned young to reach for the most broken piece, the burnt end, the smallest share, so that someone else could have enough. Nobody sat you down and taught it to you. You just watched which portion the tired grown-ups took, and you copied it, and it became the shape of your hands for life. There is a real tenderness buried in that. There is also an old ache, because a child who always takes the least eventually forgets they were ever allowed to be fed at all. I saw you at that table. I have not forgotten which piece you reached for. There was a woman a long time ago who lived exactly where you are living now, not in the middle of a crowd being fed. Out at the edge of the story, in a foreign town, in a drought so long the ground had forgotten the shape of rain. She had a boy, a little flour, a little oil, and she had done the math the way you do it in the dark. Enough for one small fire, one last loaf. She had gone out to gather 2 sticks, just 2, because that is all a final meal asks of a person. When a stranger stepped to the edge of her yard and asked her for bread, sit with the size of what he asked, not for the middle of her supply, not for a share. Once she had made sure of her own first. He asked for the first piece, baked and handed over before she made a single thing for herself or her son. He asked it of a woman who was gathering kindling for what she believed was the last meal of her life. If you have ever felt the whole weight of a request land on you at the exact moment you had the least to answer it with, then you already know the sound the blood makes in your ears when someone reaches for the very thing you were saving to survive on. And she was not deciding only for herself. There was a boy behind her in that house, small and hungry, and watching her face for what would come next. The hardest fist to pry open is never the one that is only guarding you. It is the one with someone else tucked behind it. If you are the person others lean on, the parent, the eldest, the steady one, then every handful you might give away has a second voice attached to it. A voice whispering that you cannot afford to be foolish with the little that is keeping them fed. I know that voice. I am not asking you to be careless with the people in your care. I am asking you to notice that you have started guarding them from me as well, as if I were one more mouth arriving to take what is theirs. And you should know it was me at the edge of that yard, not to take a hungry woman's flour. I have never once needed the last of anyone's meal. I stood there, because the asking was how I meant to come near her. Nearer than a full barrel dropped on her step could ever have brought me. A gift left at the door would have fed her, and moved on. A request drew her out to the threshold to answer it, and there, at the threshold in the deciding, is where she and I finally met. That is why I am at your door as a voice and not a delivery. I did not come to hand you a supply. I came to be met. You have been waiting for me to fill the jar first, to prove the supply before you loosen your grip on the little you have left. I understand the waiting. Anyone who has stood at the bottom learns to hold what remains, with both fists. But hear the thing that is hard and true at the same time. I am rarely met inside the full barrel. I am met in the hand that opens before the barrel is full. In the shaking yes offered at the exact floor of what a person believed they could spare. Feel your shoulders come down from where they have been living, up somewhere near your ears, braced against a lack you have carried longer than you can name. You are not required to hold them there while I say the next part. Let them drop. Nothing I am about to ask of you asks you to be strong first. Somewhere in there you picked up a quiet idea and never once questioned it. That a hand with plenty in it must be a hand I have blessed, and a hand scraped down to its final crumbs must be a hand I somehow overlooked. So the lean stretches stopped being seasons and started being verdicts. Every empty jar read to you like a report card, and the grade at the bottom never changed. Passed over. Not chosen. Not the sort of person the good things ever walk toward. You stopped noticing it was even a thought. It moved in and became the light you read your whole life by. A dimness laid over your good days as heavily as your hard ones. Let me lift that idea into the light and show you the hand that actually wrote it, because it was never mine. I have never once weighed you by what was left in the jar when the month closed. That way of measuring got into you. For reasons I understand completely. There really was a stretch behind you when a careful eye on every level was the difference between keeping the lights on and going under. And I did not resent 1 hour of that watching. But the danger passed, and the watching did not. The famine ended, and the habit of famine stayed on. A heart trained to guard the last of everything keeps guarding long after the threat is gone. First it guards the bread, then it starts to guard the rest. The gladness, even the length of the prayers it will let itself pray. Come back to the woman at the edge of the drought, because this is where it turns. She looked at the stranger and told him the plain truth. She had nothing baked at all, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil and 2 sticks gathered to make one last meal for herself and her boy before they lay down and did not get up. She did not pretend the jar was fuller than it was. She did not perform a strength she did not have, and I did not scold the smallness out of her. I answered it. Here is the word I actually gave her over that little, and I want you to hear the order of it, because the order carries the whole lesson. 1 Kings 17:14. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. Now notice what came the moment before it. First the loaf. Make me a little cake first, I said through my prophet, and bring it out to me, and after that make something for yourself and your son. The command to give stood in front of the promise. She did not get to watch the jar stay full and then decide it was safe to share. She had to move on, nothing but a word, with the flour looking exactly as thin in her palm as it had at sunrise. That is what I asked of her, not a fortune surrendered, a handful given into the dark before a single thing had changed. The account does go on to say the little held, that the flour did not give out and the oil did not fail, morning after morning, all the way through the drought. But I did not carry you this far to fix your eyes on the jar. If the only thing you take from her is that a container never ran dry, you will spend the rest of your life staring at your own supply, waiting to watch the level hold before you will trust me. And that is the very cage I came to open. The wonder was never the flower that lasted. The wonder was a frightened woman who unclenched her hand at the bottom of everything and gave the first piece away with no proof at all that it was safe. So let me be plainer with you than the loud voices that make a trade out of stories like hers. I am not promising you a jar that refills on a schedule you can circle. I am not telling you a cupboard will fill, or a lean season will lift, or a door will open by a date you can mark on a wall. I never signed my name to promises shaped like that, and the ones who do are not speaking for me, however holy they arrange it to sound. What I am asking you for was never your bread. It is the handful of trust you have been gripping in a closed fist, at the very floor of things, and what I am holding out in return is not a fuller shelf. It is myself. At your hearth, in the lean, the one who does not leave the room when the flour runs low. And I want to guard you from turning this into a bargain, because the loud voices will try to. This is not give a little to get a lot. It is not a coin dropped in a slot that pays out if your faith is strong enough. She did not hand over the loaf as a down payment on a fortune. She handed it over because a word had been spoken to her, and she decided to lean her whole weight on the one who spoke it. Trust is not a technique for getting the jar filled. Trust is what it looks like to stop being alone with the jar. If you open your hand only to make me fill it, the fist has not really opened at all. It has just learned a more spiritual way to stay closed. And I am still standing where I started, just outside your gate. In no rush to leave, I have not knocked once and given up. I do not wait at a door for a while and then decide the house was not worth it. Through the whole long drought she lived, I was nearer to that little jar than she ever guessed. And I have been nearer to your scraped out places than you have let yourself believe. You thought the quiet meant I had gone. It was only patience. I was waiting there for the day you would come to the end of your own supply and be ready at last to open the door to something other than more of your own effort. There is a reason I came to her, and not to 100 easier doors. Years after that drought, standing in a crowded room in the town where I grew up, I reminded the people that there were many widows in the land in those hard years, and that my prophet was sent to none of them. Only across the border, only to a foreigner, to one woman at the end of her flower in a town that was not even ours. Sit with that a moment. Of every door in that whole famine, I walked to the one that had long since stopped expecting to be chosen. You have counted yourself among the overlooked for so long that you no longer listen for a knock. You assume the good news, if it is coming at all, is coming for the fuller houses, the stronger ones, the people whose jars are not scraping bottom. Hear me undo that quietly. The border I was most willing to cross was the one drawn around the person who had given up on mattering. The distance I most love to close is the distance between me and the one who is sure they are the extra, the afterthought, the last house anyone would think to visit. That is not a door I tolerate. It is the door I aim for. Think about those 2 sticks a moment. Not an armful of firewood. 2. She had counted even her kindling down to precisely what one last meal would need, and no more, because gathering extra would have meant hoping for a tomorrow she no longer expected to see. There is a particular tiredness in that, the tiredness of a person who has stopped preparing for a future, because the future stopped feeling like anything that would actually arrive. If you have quietly stopped gathering the extra stick, stopped planning past the next hard stretch, stopped letting yourself want a single thing you might not get, I am not going to shame the caution out of you. But know this, I came looking for exactly that woman, with exactly that small, careful pile of kindling. And I did not come to take her last fire. I came to sit down beside it, touch your throat, right at the place a word has to pass through before you can say it out loud. Under your hand is a sentence you have kept behind your teeth for years. If I let go of this, there will be nothing left for me. You do not owe that sentence to anyone. Let it simply be true under your own palm for the space of one slow breath. I have known that fear was living in you since long before you had any language for it, and knowing it has never once made you smaller in my eyes. It is not a shameful thing to feel. It is the most honest prayer a person with a nearly empty jar can bring, and I would rather have it than the bravest thing you could pretend. I am not asking you to stop feeling it. I am asking you to give the handful while you still feel it. The way she gathered her 2 sticks, with her hands unsteady, and baked the first loaf for a stranger before she understood one thing about how it would end. Courage was never the moment the fear finally lifted off her. Courage was the loaf handed out with the fear still moving through her fingers. You do not have to wait until you feel full before you are allowed to trust me. You only have to open the hand once, into the dark, on nothing but the word I am speaking to you. Think about what the handful even is for you, because it is almost never flour. It is the apology you have been rationing. Rationing because you are afraid the other person will take it and hand you nothing back. It is the prayer you keep short. Short because you are hoarding your strength for the emergency you are certain is on its way. It is the tenderness you dole out carefully. The hope you refuse to spend. The honest word you will not risk. Because some old lean year convinced you that whatever you release does not return. That closed fist is the thing I'm standing at your door for. Not the flower. The fist. Part of what keeps the hand shut is an old fear of being made a fool. Somewhere you learned that the people who open up are the ones who get taken advantage of. That trust is only naivety that has not been punished yet. So you keep a careful, defended grip on everything, and you call it being sensible. And underneath the sense sits a small dread that if you ever truly let go, you would be proven a fool for it. Hear me on this. She was not a fool for baking that loaf. She turned out to be the one person in that entire famine who was fed by a word instead of ruined by her own caution. The world will call an open hand foolish, right up until it sees what the open hand receives. And notice, I never ask you for something you are not given. I ask for the first of what is already in your hand. I do not come demanding a supply that was never placed there, a patience you do not have, a courage you were never handed, a love no one ever taught you. I come asking for the first small portion of what is already there, the first minute of a morning, the first honest line in an argument you would rather win, the first loosening of a grip you have kept for years, on a grievance you have almost come to love. Little has never been a problem to me. Little has always been my chosen material. The question was never the size of what you hold. The only question was ever whose hand you are willing to set it in. I know how completely backward this runs against everything the hungry years taught you. Everything in you says feed yourself first, make sure of your own, and give only out of the overflow once the overflow has safely arrived. But the overflow you have been waiting on those exact terms, was never going to come, because the terms themselves were the cage. Provision that will only move after you feel secure is not trust at all. It is bookkeeping with a spiritual accent. And I did not walk all this way to teach you sharper bookkeeping. I came to teach a clenched hand how to open while it is still afraid of the cold. Breathe out now, and let it leave you unhurried, slower going out than it came in, the way an open hand always takes longer to give than a fist takes to close. Someone keeping watch over their final reserves keeps a little held back even here, even in the breath. Braced against a loss they have already decided is coming, you can stop the bracing for the length of this one. Let the air go all the way to the end of itself, past the point where you would usually cut it short, and let the long, slow leaving of it say the thing your mouth has trouble forming. That keeping the jar full was never the work I gave you, and never the work your two hands could have managed anyway. You have carried the weight of being the source for so long, the one everyone draws from. The jar the whole household reaches into without ever asking how much is left at the bottom. No wonder. Your hands have learned to close. When you believe you are the supply, every request feels like a subtraction. And every gift you give is one more thing gone that no one is coming behind you to replace. Hear me take that off your back. You were never the source. You were always the one being kept. The flower in her jar was never truly hers to protect. It was mine to sustain. And the strength in your two tired hands was never actually the thing holding your household upright either. I still am. That is why the giving does not hollow you out the way you fear it will. When the supply belongs to you and you alone, every handful given is a handful lost for good. But when the supply is mine to keep, the giving turns into the very place you find out I am still keeping it. She did not come to trust the jar by keeping watch over it. She came to trust it by handing the first loaf away and waking to find the morning still had bread in it. The trusting had to move before the knowing could catch up. That is almost always the sequence with me. The hand opens in the dark first, and only afterward do the eyes adjust enough to see what was there the whole time. There's a kind of giving that even children understand better than we do. When a small child wants to share with you, they do not run to fetch the finest thing in the house. They press the half-eaten cracker into your palm, the crayon worn down to a stub, the flower already wilting in their fist. It is the nearest thing, the smallest thing, and they give it gladly because it has not yet occurred to them that a gift has to be impressive to count. That is far closer to the faith I am asking of you than any polished offering you could rehearse. Give me the nearest, smallest, most worn-down handful of what you have. I am not grading it. I am only waiting to be handed something real. So carry her doorway back to your own, back to the counter where you stand and eat what is left once the house goes still, back to the fist you did not even realize you were holding shut. I am not going to shame the counting out of you. It is too old and too honest for shaming. But I am changing what it is in service of. You have been holding the handful back in order to survive. I am asking you to open it. Not because you have suddenly become strong, but because I am the one asking. And because a hand that opens toward me is the hand that finally learns it was being held the entire time. Do not measure any of this by how it feels the first time you try it. Old fear does not leave the way it came in. The first time you loosen the grip, give the apology before you are sure of the reply. Pray the longer prayer. Spend the hope you have been hoarding for a rainier day. It may feel exactly like handing your last loaf to a stranger in a drought. It may feel like too much, and too soon, and far more than you can spare. Give it anyway. Not the whole jar, a handful. And then wake into the next ordinary morning and notice, without any fanfare, that you are still here, still standing, still somehow fed. That is not the flower performing a trick. That is me, keeping with you the word I once kept with her. I will not promise you the drought ends by a morning you can name. That was never the shape of what I keep. The rain came to her land in its own time, on a day she did not choose and could not have hurried. What I promise is the thing that held her every single day until it did. A little that never had to become a lot to be enough. A hearth that stayed warm through a season with no business staying warm. And a presence at her table that turned a house of last meals into a place where 3 people quietly went on being fed, one unremarkable day after another. Do not look down on the smallness of what held her. A handful a day sounds like poverty until you have lived on it and found it faithful. The little was not a punishment to be endured until the real provision showed up. The little was the provision. Every morning it was there, and every morning it was enough. And not one morning did it come as a hoard she had to defend through the night. There is a strange freedom in bread that only ever arrives a day at a time. It cannot be stored up, so it cannot be lost. It has to be received fresh each morning, which means she woke every single day to the same quiet proof that she had not been forgotten in the dark. That is not a lesser answer than the one your heart came here wanting. It is the sturdier one. The full jar you were hoping for could empty again by evening. What held her did not. It doesn't slip away the hour your own strength finally gives out. Because it was never leaning on your strength to begin with. It leans on mine. And mine doesn't tire. And mine doesn't ration. And mine has never once been down to the last of anything. Look at your hand for a moment, the one that has been closed. There is more in it than you think, and less is required of it than you fear. I am not asking for everything at once. I am asking for the first portion, offered before the proof, into the keeping of the one who fed a widow through a whole famine on a handful that would not quit. Open it slowly, on nothing but my word, the way she opened hers, out at the edge of a drought, with a stranger at her gate and her boy behind her, and no reason on earth to believe except the voice in front of her. You will not find the bottom of me. Others have handed me far less than you are holding right now, out of far deeper droughts than yours, and I have never once let it be the end of them. Amen. If any of this reached the fist, you did not know you were holding shut, the last handful of hope or honesty or tenderness you were saving to survive on. Leave one word for me in the comments below. Open. Not to prove anything, just to let the hand be spoken open once. And if someone you love is standing at their own bare threshold, gathering 2 sticks for what they are sure is the last of it, share this where they will find it. There is bread at their door, and it was never their flour I was after.